Hi everyone, and welcome to the Measurement in Social Science video lecture. In this lecture, we'll discuss why measurement in social science is so important, even for those students who do not plan on continuing along a research-related career path. This is a definition here from one of my old research methods textbooks, and I've loved it so much that I've provided it verbatim for you on this slide. Measurement is careful, deliberate observations of the real world for the purpose of describing objects and events. Notice the highlights here. Careful and deliberate, and that's really important. In our everyday lives, we disregard a lot of information that isn't relevant or important enough to store in our memory. For example, what shirt did you wear 4 days ago? Do you remember? Chances are you don't, unless maybe there was a special event 4 days ago that you picked out a special outfit for. Otherwise, that type of information is disregarded when we don't need it anymore because your brain decides it's not important enough to retain. This process is how biases and prejudices continue. You don't even realize it, but when you have an idea, you will subconsciously focus on data that confirms your idea and disregard the information that negates it. So when we are doing social science research, we want to make sure that we're avoiding biases and prejudices, and we're doing this careful, deliberate process of observation. Now, careful and deliberate observations don't sound so hard, right? Why do you need a whole class about how to measure things? The importance of this class stems from the unique challenges of social science. In the physical science, measurement is pretty straightforward. You want the number of legs on an insect? Count them. You want to measure oven temperature? Use a thermometer. You want to find out how big your room is? Use a ruler or a measuring tape. And generally, even if you and I choose different methods to measure, we can still verify that we've come to the same conclusion pretty easily. If you measured the room in feet and I measured in inches, we can change the units of our measurements and we should still have the same number. So it's a pretty consistent, relatively simple process. But what about social science measurements? Consider these things that you might measure in social science research: profanity, poverty, and criminality. There's no magic formula for those. For example, consider these photos. Pretend you're trying to count the number of times profanity was shown in a video game, and you see these 3 images. How many of these would you count as profanity? Image A doesn't contain any specific profanity, but it's implied by the use of symbols and the angry face. Image B has a cultural meaning that is profane, but again doesn't actually say a profane word. And image C contains a profane word, but one of the letters has been replaced. So are all of these counted as profanity? Just image C, image B and C, or none of them? This uncertainty regarding the word profanity is because it's something that's known in research methods as a concept. This means that the word itself is something you know instinctively, but your understanding and your definition of the word may differ from other people. Another definition of concepts is abstract mental pictures that exist in our mind. When I say that I'm going to measure profanity, I have an image in my mind of what that means in terms of what specifically I'm going to measure. The reason this class, and in particular this module, is so important is that it is not an easy task to take that image from your mind and put it down on paper so that other people can replicate exactly what you're doing. So let's consider another example: poverty. If you look up the definition of poverty, you find a lot of close but very distinct ideas of what poverty actually means. The United Nations has a paragraph-long definition of poverty that starts with the denial of choices and opportunities. Their definition includes not having enough food and clothing for a family, not having a job to earn a living, being susceptible to violence, and not having access to clean water and sanitation, among other points. This definition is very broad on purpose because it notes that poverty in a third world country will look very different than poverty in a developed country. Poverty is also commonly described in financial terms. The United States Census states that poverty is defined by a set of money income thresholds that vary based on family size and composition. According to the 2020 Poverty Guide, a single person must make less than $12,760 to be living in poverty, but a household with 5 people can earn up to $30,680 and still be considered living in poverty. The World Financial Bank the World Bank has a financial definition as well, using a $1.90 per person per day standard with adaptations for different country currencies. The World Bank, however, also acknowledges the multidimensional nature of poverty and has developed a multidimensional poverty index that takes into account a variety of factors at both the individual and the county level. This multi-dimensional approach is similar to that of the ASCD, which is an international educational group. Rather than using one definition of poverty, they define 6 different types of poverty, each with its own calculation method and usage. So what does all of this tell us? It tells us that the concepts themselves are not measurable as is because they're subjective and abstract. Even if we have similar ideas of what they mean, concepts leave room for variations between people and researchers, and that means they can introduce error into our research unless they're defined properly. In order to conduct research, then, we must first define our concepts. We call these definitions variables. They are measurement proxies for concepts, serving to help us measure the concept in the real world, but using a more repeatable definition. So in the case of poverty, we would first define a poverty variable and identify what types of poverty we will include in that variable. That way, we will all measure the poverty variable in the exact same way. All right, well, that concludes our first lecture about measurement in social science. Join me in the next video lectures as we explore the actual process of measurement.